A worker bee drops onto a flower, folds her legs into the petals, and begins reading a world that is almost completely invisible to us. In the open air, it looks ordinary. A yellow blur, a quick landing, a moment of feeding. Nearby, another bee slips into the dark mouth of a hive, disappearing between bodies, wax, warmth, and vibration. Deeper inside, another worker crosses a wall of comb where almost no light reaches, touching, tasting, and sensing her way through a living city. From the outside, bees seem simple. They visit flowers. They make honey. They sting when threatened. They buzz through gardens as if they are just tiny machines doing one repetitive job. But that familiar picture is missing almost everything. A bee is not just finding a flower. She may be seeing colors humans cannot see. She may be feeling faint electrical traces around a blossom. She may be comparing scent signatures through antennae packed with chemical sensors. She may be remembering a route across fields, trees, fences, rooftops, and sunlight, then returning to a hive entrance small enough to miss with a glance. And inside the colony, the strangeness gets even deeper. There are no blueprints pinned to the comb, but workers build some of the most efficient natural structures on Earth. There is no thermostat on the wall, but the colony controls heat around developing young. There is no single commander giving orders, but thousands of bees can make decisions together, defend together, and relocate an entire society together. These are not magic tricks. They are superpowers only because they look impossible at the scale of a creature that can stand on a fingertip. Every ability is an adaptation, shaped by the pressure to solve a problem. How to navigate, how to find food, how to share information, how to survive cold, heat, predators, distance, darkness, and competition. The first power begins with vision. To human eyes, a flower may look plain, or evenly colored, or decorative in a way meant only for us. But many bees do not see the same flower we see. Honeybees are sensitive to ultraviolet, blue, and green wavelengths. They do not see red the way humans do, but in exchange, they can detect ultraviolet patterns that are completely hidden from us. On some petals, ultraviolet reflective and ultraviolet absorbing areas form markings like landing guides, arrows, rings, or dark centers. A blossom that looks simple in daylight can appear, to a bee, like it has a signal painted across it. Those patterns can point toward nectar and pollen. So when a bee approaches a flower, she is not just attracted to color in a basic sense. She may be using a visual system tuned to the secret language of pollination. Flowers advertise. Bees read. And the garden becomes a coded landscape, bright with instructions humans usually never notice. Then comes a power even stranger because it is nearly silent. Flowers can have weak electric fields. Flying bees can become positively charged as they move through the air, partly through friction. When a bee visits a flower, that visit can temporarily change the flower's electrical state. To us, the flower remains still. To a bee, especially in studies of bumblebees, these faint electrical cues can become information. A flower that has just been visited may not be as rewarding as one that has had time to refill with nectar. Before fully committing, a bee may be sensing clues that tell her something has changed. It is not lightning. It is not a dramatic spark. It is quieter than that. A hidden layer of the world passing between wings and petals. And once the invisible signals outside the bee are revealed, the next secret is inside her own body. Those antennae on her head are not just feelers. They are major chemical sensing organs. Through tiny sensory structures, bees detect odors that help them identify flowers, recognize nestmates, and respond to the colony's internal messages. A floral scent can be learned and remembered. A hive has an odor signature that helps separate family from intruder. Pheromones can raise alarm, guide orientation, regulate reproduction, and shape social behavior across thousands of individuals. In research settings, bees have even been trained to respond to certain human-relevant odors, showing just how powerful their learning and scent detection can be. For a bee, smell is not background. It is a map, a warning system, an identity check, a memory trigger, a stream of chemical information flowing through the air and through the hive. Now follow one worker as she leaves the entrance. She does not simply wander and hope. Before becoming a full forager, a honeybee performs orientation flights, looping near the hive, facing back toward it, learning the visual landmarks that surround home. She records the arrangement of the world, the tree line, the fence, the open patch, the shadowed edge, the position of the sun. Later, she may fly hundreds of meters, or even several kilometers when conditions demand it, across a landscape huge compared with her body. The sun moves while she is gone. The light changes. The ground below becomes a shifting mosaic of shapes and smells. And still, she can return. She can compensate for the sun's movement over time. She can use landmarks and direction cues. She can leave a hive that looks like one small opening among thousands of possible hiding places, search the wider world, and come back to exactly where she started. That alone would be enough to make bees remarkable. But the next power turns memory into a message. Inside the darkness of the hive, a successful honeybee forager climbs onto the comb and begins to dance. She moves in a pattern known as the waggle dance, a behavior famously studied by Carl von Frisch. The dance is not random excitement. Its angle carries direction, relating the food source to the position of the sun. Its waggle duration carries information about distance. Other workers gather close, touching her, sensing her movement, and picking up odors from the flowers she visited. She does not need to lead them there. She can describe where the food is. In darkness, on wax, inside a crowded hive, one small insect can encode the location of a distant flower patch and recruit others to find it. This is where the idea begins to change. A bee is not just a pollinator drifting from bloom to bloom. She is a navigator, sensor, chemist, messenger, and living instrument, solving problems far larger than her body should allow. The story turns from information to force. A forager lifts off with her body already loaded, wings beating roughly 200 times each second, her flight muscles driving a machine far smaller and stranger than any bird. She may carry nectar inside a special honey stomach. She may carry pollen packed into baskets on her hind legs, bright clumps pressed into place until she looks almost overburdened. She may bring water for cooling the hive, or resin that workers use to help seal and protect the colony. Every extra load changes the flight. More weight means more energy, more drag, more control needed in the air. Yet the bee still has to steer, avoid obstacles, judge distance, and return to the correct entrance. Her wings are not moving in a simple up and down flap. They twist and beat through rapid arcs, powered by indirect flight muscles attached to the thorax. The whole middle of her body becomes an engine. So the bee that seemed delicate on a pedal is also a cargo aircraft, lifting food from the landscape and delivering it back to a city that depends on thousands of such trips. And when that cargo reaches the hive, another superpower begins to appear in wax. Honeybee workers secret tiny wax scales from glands on their abdomens. Other workers take those scales, soften them, mold them, and turn them into comb. No queen stands over the process with instructions. No single worker holds the entire design. Yet the result is one of nature's classic engineering feats. Sheets of hexagonal cells, fitted together with extraordinary efficiency. A hexagon shares walls with its neighbors. That means less wax is needed to create more storage space. The comb becomes strong, light, and useful all at once. Some cells hold honey, some hold pollen, some cradle developing brood. Across the surface, cell size and purpose can vary, but the deeper principle remains the same. The colony is building with its own bodies. The material comes from bees. The labor comes from bees. The pattern emerges from repeated local actions and the physical properties of wax. A hive is not just a home bees find. It is a structure they manufacture, maintain, heat, defend, and live inside. And heat is the next power. Deep within the brood nest, developing honeybees need stable warmth, often around 34 to 35 degrees Celsius. Outside the hive, the day may swing from cold morning to hot afternoon. Inside, the colony works like a living climate system. In cold conditions, workers cluster together and conserve warmth. Some generate heat by activating their flight muscles without actually flying, vibrating internally like tiny furnaces. In hot conditions, other workers fan air through the hive, while some spread water so evaporation can cool the space. No central thermostat tells each bee what to do. The temperature is controlled by many bodies responding to local conditions. One bee senses heat, another fans, another carries water, another warms the brood. Together, their small actions become colony-level control. The hive holds life in a narrow, protected range, not because one mind commands it, but because many specialized behaviors overlap. Then, the same power that protects young can become a weapon. When certain hornets threaten a colony, especially in the well-documented battles between Asian honeybees and giant hornets, the bees may not rely on stinging as their main defense. Instead, workers rush the attacker and surround it. They form a tight ball of living bodies around the hornet. Inside that ball, the temperature rises. The bees vibrate and generate heat until the trapped hornet reaches a lethal limit. The bees can tolerate slightly higher temperatures than the hornet for a short time, and that narrow difference becomes the weapon. The defense is not brute strength. One bee alone could not overpower such an enemy. But together, the colony turns heat into strategy. The scene is tense because the margin is thin. Too little heat, and the hornet survives. Too much, and the bees risk themselves. The success depends on coordination, numbers, timing, and a body-level understanding written by evolution rather than instruction. And that raises the final question. If there is no commander, how does a colony decide anything? The answer may be the most unsettling superpower of all. Honeybees can make major decisions without a leader in charge of the decision. During swarming, when a colony reproduces naturally, a queen and many workers leave the old nest and gather while scouts search for a new home. Those scouts inspect possible nest sites, evaluating spaces that differ in size, protection, entrance quality, and location. When scouts return, they advertise promising sites with dances. Better sites tend to receive stronger recruitment. More scouts visit them. More dances support them. Over time, support builds around one option until enough workers converge on the same choice. Then, the swarm moves. The queen does not choose the address. The colony chooses through distributed behavior. Information is gathered by many individuals, compared through recruitment, and turned into action by consensus. No single bee understands the whole process the way a human planner might. Yet the group solves a problem that could determine whether the colony survives. This is the deepest version of the bee superpower pattern. Small senses become maps. Small dances become directions. Small wax scales become architecture. Small heat pulses become climate control and defense. Small preferences become collective decisions. The individual bee is astonishing. The colony is something more. A bee lands on an ordinary flower, and now the moment no longer looks ordinary at all. The petals are not just petals. They may be marked with ultraviolet patterns we cannot see. The air around them may carry faint electrical information. The scent rising from the bloom may match a memory stored from earlier flights. The bee's antennae move through chemical signals. Her eyes read colors outside human vision, and her body weighs the reward of this stop against the needs of a colony hidden somewhere beyond the garden. At the beginning, it was easy to shrink bees down in our imagination until they became simple, busy, useful, maybe a little dangerous, but simple. They pollinate. They make honey. They defend themselves. They vanish into flowers and come back out dusted with pollen. But that version of a bee is only the surface. Underneath it is an animal built from precision. A bee does not need a large body to cross a large landscape. She does not need human-like language to share directions. She does not need a blueprint to help build efficient comb. She does not need a thermostat to help stabilize a nursery. She does not need a general to take part in collective defense or a ruler to help choose the future home of the colony. Her world is filled with information. Some of it is visual, glowing in ultraviolet patterns on flowers that look plain to us. Some of it is electrical, written in weak fields that change after a visit. Some of it is chemical, carried as odor, pheromone, alarm, identity, memory, and invitation. Some of it is spatial, built from sunlight, landmarks, distance, time, and repeated flights over a landscape that should seem impossibly large for such a small brain. And then, inside the hive, that information becomes cooperation. A returning forager can dance on dark comb and turn a flower patch into direction and distance. Workers can take wax from their own bodies and shape it into a shared structure, strong enough to hold honey, pollen, and young. They can warm brood with their muscles, cool the hive with fanning and water, and gather into a living shield when danger appears. They can compare nest sites through the actions of scouts until a swarm moves as if it has made one decision, even though no single bee commanded it. That is the real shift. Bees are not impressive because they secretly act like tiny humans. They are impressive because they are completely themselves. Their complexity does not always look like speech, tools, plans, or a single central mind. It is spread across senses, bodies, instincts, memory, learning, and thousands of interactions. It is built into eyes that see a different garden, antennae that read a chemical world, wings that carry heavy loads home, muscles that become heaters, and dances that turn private discovery into public knowledge. A colony is not one brain, but it can still solve problems. It can gather information, test options, distribute labor, maintain conditions, and respond to threats. Its intelligence is not stored in one place. It moves. It vibrates through comb. It passes from bee to bee in scent, touch, heat, motion, and timing. So the next time a bee settles onto a flower, the scene is worth slowing down for. There is no need to imagine magic. The truth is stranger and more elegant. That small body is carrying an ancient toolkit shaped by millions of years of pressure. Ultraviolet sight, electrical sensitivity, chemical perception, navigation, memory, communication, flight power, engineering, temperature control, defense, and collective decision-making. The bee lowers her head into the bloom. Her legs brush pollen. Her antennae test the air. Her wings rest for only a moment before the next flight. And what looks like a tiny insect visiting a flower is really a meeting between two living systems, full of signals most of us will never sense. The flower is not just offering color. The bee is not just taking nectar. Hidden in that quiet contact is a world of evolved skill, precise enough to feed a colony, pollinate a landscape, and turn a familiar garden into something almost alien. The bee lifts off again, small against the open air. This time, she does not look simple.